Now, our final session to take us to drinks, and it's time to fire up for Controversy Corner. I'd like to invite our panellists to join us on the stage. Lindy Deitz is the Chief Executive from Campbelltown City Council. Tom Forrest is the CEO of the Urban Taskforce. Nicole Gurran is Professor of Urban and Regional Planning and also the Director of the Henry Halloran Trust at the University of Sydney School of Architecture, Planning and Design. Geoff Roberts, AM, is the Chief Commissioner of the Greater Sydney Commission. And asking the questions, our provocateur this afternoon, Professor Andy Marks, pardon me, Vice-Chancellor, Strategy, Government and Alliances at Western Sydney University. Please make them welcome.
Thanks for that. I'm going to do my best Rex Mossop impersonation. No, I'm not. This is the graveyard shift, but we're going to get through it. We're going to be sharp, we're going to be fast, and hopefully a little bit ugly. But when you stand between the end of the day and drinks, you've got to be quick. So we'll do that at least. I'm actually here to talk about the opposite to the boom, the bust. And I don't want to bring things down, and I promise I'll finish on a high note. But whenever there's a boom, almost by consequence, somebody misses out in the context of Western Sydney. And these guys won't have all the answers, but I know they think about it, this kind of stuff, all the time. So I'm going to get to that first, and I'm going to start, Lindy, with you. And I've got one word for you: dongles. Yeah, I know. It's a strange start. I heard from Beck within your management team that Campbelltown was the area that received the most internet dongles during lockdown. The translation of that being that you had really low rates of connectivity. So all the kids that were forced home, like the rest of us, to homeschool for a pretty long stretch, and boy, it was long. I had two of mine home. You guys weren't connected. So we're always, you and I, talking about the lack of transport connections. But how hard is it to get this right in terms of internet connection? And what can we do to make sure that you're no longer stranded down in the southwest digitally? It seems so simple. Why is it so hard?
Why is it so hard? I don't know the answer to that question, but it is absolutely something of significant concern. If you look at it from a people perspective, what happened for us in Campbelltown in some of our lower socio-economic areas is that those children who used to use our libraries to do all their homework and to gather together and continue their education because they couldn't go home because they didn't have access to it, were suddenly disengaged and wandering the streets, which was exactly what we didn't want them to do because we had a health pandemic. So it absolutely contributes to antisocial behaviour. It is losing the appetite for learning from those young people whom they do have high skills. They don't have great self-esteem, but they actually have wonderful skills. Yeah. So all of those things contribute to the demise of a healthy community. So what should we do about it? Interestingly enough, the schools themselves have some of the fastest internet speeds ever. And I think we need to think outside the square in these sort of circumstances. Instead of just dealing with the immediate crisis, we need to be acting on strategies that are going to prevent that from ever happening again. Figure out a way to utilise those very expensive internet connections that schools have and actually share it with those who need it most.
Yeah, totally. And this is one of those areas where we just can't imagine the impact of this going forward. It's going to be incredibly damaging, I think, and I know we can act to do better. Geoff, and I know actually the Commission was very active even after the first lockdown in talking about the digital divide. But I'm not going to ask you about that. But congratulations on raising that issue. It was really important to see it happen in government. I'm going to ask you about how long does it take? Now, the Commission's been around for 6 years now. This administration's been around for 10. And Labor before it were around even longer. And in those 26 odd years alone, inequity in Western Sydney, in some areas, youth unemployment, transport, I think has remained, if not worse, but for some of them, it's remained a problem that governments have simply been unable to address. We accept that it takes time, but come on, how long does it take, Geoff?
Yes, and look, the most important thing, I don't know whether you noticed, but I've actually got sand shoes on today, and I wanted to align myself with the modern leadership dialogue with Chris Brown, who you'll notice also has sand shoes, and Andy has sand shoes. I also have sand shoes. That's because I broke my toe last night, not because I'm trying to be a .com specialist. So that's just to begin. I think we should be aiming for the 1 second city. I think equity is still the core tenet that underpins the purpose and function of the Greater Sydney Commission, or the Greater Cities Commission, as I think will become known as next year. I worry, I'm a train spotter as much as any of the nerds that were up here, including my colleague Liz Dibbs in the previous section, but I worry about how long it takes to build out the train and the transit system in cities. And what we've learnt internationally this year is that the digital divide is getting worse quicker, and I don't think we can wait 10, 20 or 30 years and subject communities to isolation, either physical or electronic, for that period of time. I think we've got a fairly basic level of connection right now. If you go to places like Seoul in South Korea, they specifically define digital connectivity as a condition precedent for the success of that city. That city had very poor livability quotients and very poor social outcomes across its social divide. And I wonder, I'm not for 1 millisecond saying that transit connectivity is not crucial. It is. But I worry about the communities in the southwest, pretty much actually all over Sydney, but it's particularly bad in the southwest. Why don't we just get on and not just deliver a sort of Kingswood version of connectivity, but we actually deliver high-speed connectivity for our business community. There is no way that companies, some of whom I can see in the room right now, are going to invest in Western Sydney if we don't have high-speed, high-quality and cyber-safe connectivity. So my controversy today is I think we're focusing too much on moving people around our city and not enough on connecting the electrons of the city in terms of a fair and equitable, particularly Western Sydney.
Yeah, that's right. Look, and I think we'd all agree that it wasn't hard infrastructure that saved the day, well, barring our hospitals, of course, during lockdown. It was digital. It was digital. So essential. Nicole, I know we are working without a net today, quote unquote, and I'm going to throw something at you in probably a way that you may have expected. We've talked a little bit about some of the things that bubbled up to the surface during lockdown. But there's been some real positives in Western Sydney as well. Taking people off public transport for 2 hours a day has meant they can go uptown, they can sit in the cafe, they can meet with friends, they can pick their kids up from sport, they can go to their kids' assembly. I know because I've done all of that, and it's been amazing. It's been the best thing about what's been a pretty ordinary year, picking your kids up from school. So getting your life back. Why, in those circumstances, would anyone, other than to serve the interests of commercial real estate, rush to get back into a CBD? Western Sydney's just coming alive again. Why spoil it by hopping on the train for another two hours a day?
I'm not sure what the question is there, and I'll see if I can inject...
It's a comment, sorry, Q&A style, but please elaborate.
Please respond. Firstly, I'm feeling so underdressed without my sand shoes on, so I missed that memo. Look, absolutely. I was terrified when I heard, talk in the city, I'm from the University of Sydney, and our near neighbours in the CBD were saying, quick, how fast can we snap back to business as usual? And in actual fact, the interruption was a tremendous opportunity to escape business as usual, which has actually been tremendously difficult for people in Western Sydney and for other parts of the country, quite frankly, as well. But the opportunity to see Western Sydney from the east as something more than a dormitory suburb, a place that you go to sleep and you come to the east to work, that has well and truly been disrupted. And I think the incredible opportunities around place, the beautiful historical main streets, actually, in many of the western suburbs that have been neglected but are just absolutely waiting to be discovered, and the opportunity of having people work either at home or potentially with some small modifications near home and commuting flexibly a couple of days a week to the CBD, I think that will benefit the entire city, but particularly Western Sydney. So I'm embracing it. I do still think, however, that the hard infrastructure that's been discussed and the digital infrastructure that's been discussed will be critical. And the housing story, of course, remains unresolved.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think government's focus, and governments do this, you can hardly blame them, but they focus on precincts and they focus on CBDs because they can achieve concentrated effort. But the majority of Sydney doesn't live in those places. It lives in the spaces in between, and that's one of the areas we'll be looking at, plug coming, at the Centre for Western Sydney next year. I think, Tom, we've covered some tricky stuff so far. I want to stick a little bit on the infrastructure question with you, and Dr Stokes issued a wonderful edict around no more black roofs a little while back, and it threw the sector into a frenzy. I'm sure Colorbond will cope. I want to talk to you about some of what you might consider to be our biggest urban planning mistakes. You only get to pick one, right? And how we might use this last 18 months as the world's best reset so we never do it again.
In some respects, I think it goes back to during the post-war period, we were the lucky country. No one saw Sydney as a city, Greater Sydney, as being bounded. And what we've found most recently is that Sydney is bounded by oceans, by national parks, by mountains. And we've got a couple of corridors to the northwest and southwest which have growth potential. We've got a nice big selection in the middle, but we became addicted to this idea of the American dream of the quarter-acre block, the white picket fence, the McMansion, if you like. We stretched our infrastructure as a result. We made it so that we are now almost retrospectively building the infrastructure that if we had been more dense in the first place, we might have been able to afford at the time that we built it. But because everyone had a car and everyone could drive everywhere, we became addicted to the car, as did America, and they were Happy Days was on television, Bewitched, everyone drove around. There was no... Can anyone think of a 1970s sort of sitcom where you saw people getting onto a train? I mean, I guess that happened in Friends and the like, but by and large they didn't. We became addicted to the dream of having then two cars, and then two cars and a boat. Fine, but problematic. And we're finding that now. How do we connect properly? We've discussed all day. How do we connect properly the new opportunities in Western Sydney? But not that. Lindy will tell you the existing opportunities in existing cities like Campbelltown, not properly connected, not properly resourced by infrastructure.
Yeah, good answer. And I think we are focusing a little bit on Campbelltown today. It just happens, right?
Fluke.
Don't know how. And we're rounding the home stretch because, as I said, the bar will open shortly. And on the topic of sand shoes and fashion, I was in such a hurry to get the kids to school this morning I forgot to put socks on. So just so you know, don't be alarmed. That's a sock alert for anyone. While you were talking, Tom, I happened to receive a text, just go with me here, from the Premier, and he's asked if each of the panellists could, in their wrap-up, that's right, the wrap-up, if you could tell us what you would do with the $5 billion West Invest Fund if you could only back one project. I'm going to you, Lindy. Oh. What would you do? One project, only $5 billion. He won't wait long. Otherwise, it's going to go to Eastern Sydney. It'll be East Invest.
It's already there.
So come on, what's it going to be?
No, he said actually that he was going to give us their $5 billion as well, didn't
Did he?
I thought that's what he
All
said.
right, it's 10.
Oh, okay, 10.
Okay, you got 10, but one thing only.
I'm going to connect a rail system to the Western Sydney Airport. Surprise, surprise! And that is because I firmly believe that the Macarthur region deserve access to jobs, employment, travel, and all of those things that a 24-hour international airport will bring.
Yeah, good. Geoff, don't.
You can't have that one.
I'm going to come to you
I love
last.
Lindy like a sister.
I'm going to come to you last, Geoff. Hold
sorry. That's so rude.
I'm building up for something big.
Okay.
I want to see a new proper placemaking initiative. It's a Rouse Hill style. It's a
10 billion. This is good. Yeah, good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to name the place, but we actually do need to build places from the ground up again, and I think we can. And that's my. I would have actually said Lindy's, but she said that, so that's my bid.
Okay, it's down to you, Tom. No pressure. 10 billion. You got 30 seconds.
Some of the best options have been taken, but look, sometimes it's the invisible infrastructure, the water sewage treatment plants. If suddenly we could just clear water as an issue, as a hurdle, as a handbrake, we could open up opportunities for employment and houses all over Western Sydney. Right now, the government makes an announcement about twice a week about new jobs for Western Sydney, about new employment opportunities in Western Sydney. But in fact, there's a whopping great handbrake, and that whopping great handbrake is you can't flush a dunny. I'd like to see the sewage, the stormwater, and the water supply all sorted. And if that gets all sorted, you'll attract the employment, which will then generate an imperative for investing in the infrastructure, the roads, the public transport infrastructure, and the rest. It's the stuff you can't see, though, that the infrastructure that you can't see and therefore isn't so sexy and doesn't get so much attention. That's what's stopping Western Sydney boom right now.
I think there's probably some folk from Sydney Water in the audience just having tears of joy at the moment. That was beautiful. It starts with water, the stuff of life. Geoff, take us home. You got 10 billion. You probably do have 10 billion, actually. But
What we're going to do is build the Leppington Link, but we're not ever going to use the name Leppington Link ever again. Because once we build the Leppington Link, we connect the T1 and the T2 lines. We genuinely connect the north and south part of the Western Parkland city. But it's not a railway line. It's a multi-utilities corridor. So it has Australia's first recycled water system in it that gets mixed in Prospect Reservoir. It has a transit way that suits Western Sydney but also begins to link the two airports together, because all mature cities in the world have rail connectivity between their airports. It has it's the spine of the 1 second city that connects all 2.5 million people that we're planning for in Western Sydney to be digitally connected. So what we're going to do is spend some of the money on corridor protection, but we're going to put more than one utility in the same place, and we're going to do it by respecting the First Nations people and actually use country and the people that know this place for 60,000 years to not build it in the middle of the wrong parts of that area. In doing so, we help solve the flooding problem because we're recycling water. We connect people from the T1 to the T2, and we digitally connect our community. So we're not playing catch up, but this is actually the capital of metropolitan Sydney in doing so.
brilliant. You brought it home. And I think as well, and we've turned a bust back into a boom, which is a feat in itself, but bringing it back to a sense of place, because today is all about place, and we have to be anchored, as we've all been at home this year, or most of us have been at home in front of a screen, in the fact and the truth that we're on Indigenous land. And I think to have that That would be my 10 billion priority, by the way, for Western Sydney, all of
We
it.
didn't ask you. You're the moderator.
Oh shit,
You're
sorry.
not responding.
And I can't be taken seriously without socks, so, but that's what I would do with 10 billion, so I'll get back to the Premier and let him know. By the way, I have to say I was with Stuart Ayres and Barney Glover this morning, just dropping a few names for you. Brownie, they couldn't get a ticket today because it was a sellout, mate, so...
They're not just paying for tickets, that's the problem.
Maybe not. All I can do in wrapping up is thank the panellists. They're wonderful. They're just wonderful people because all of them believe in Western Sydney and they never take no for an answer, which is what Western Sydney is all about. And that's why we're talking about the boom that never ends for the right reasons. So thank you, panellists. Please put your hands together for them. And this bloke over here, just for the next 5 minutes, I've got authority from the Chancellor to refer to you as Professor Brown. Just for 5 minutes only, all right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Artist formerly known as Dr. Andy Marks, now he's a professor, so...
Can these guys leave now?
I'm going to let them leave any second. We always save the best for last. Of the 140 of you still here who survived through, thank you very much. For the 4 of you who spiced up and made them worth their staying, thank you very much. Feel free to leave, feel free to applaud them. Thank Andy Marks. You lot have earned a drink. I'm about to let you have one.